Welcome to Opportunity Costs. Join us as we dive into meaningful conversations that empower individuals navigating the complexities of divorce. Our mission is to provide insight, support, and practical strategies to help you make informed decisions during this challenging time.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode numero uno of the Opportunity Costs podcast. I am your co-host for the show, Jeremy Wolf, and I'm joined by the team over at InDivorce, who will be hosting this beautiful show moving forward. Guys, good to see you. Welcome to the show. Excited to get into this journey with you all. Yeah, so I remember when we first met, I was intrigued by what you guys did over at InDivorce. It seemed like a logical solution to going through the divorce process. So I thought that this would be a perfect time to set the stage and talk a little bit about what you guys do at InDivorce, how you linked up together as a team, because you each bring very interesting different perspectives and different backgrounds that complement each other rather nicely. So who would like to start? I want to go around the room and get each of your perspectives, but who would like to start and tell everybody, starting off, a little bit about what you do at InDivorce?
John, you want to go
I'll
first?
nominate Elizabeth.
I second that nomination.
We're gentlemen.
So we all three came together because we saw divorce as a journey more than an event. And we also saw it as an emotional event and a financial event more than a legal event. Meaning when two people are deciding to transition from being married to being divorced, especially when they have children, it's not something that happens and then it's over. It is something that will iterate over time and change, and they need to work together. And so having a process that tears something apart when you need to work together doesn't make logical sense. So I come from a therapeutic and mental health background, as does Adam. John comes from a legal and accounting background. And so we work all three together to keep the legal parts of it to a minimum and to allow people to have the most control over the next chapter of their life, and to model, as you saw by who goes first, we model communication and cooperation with our clients in hopes that our process begins their next chapter in a way in which they learn to work together even when they're living apart.
And I know most people, before I met you guys, I wasn't even really aware of this. Obviously, this isn't on my radar, so I'm happily married, knock on wood here.
Hear that, Jeremy's wife? He's happily married.
But like if I was in a troubled time and I needed to go through that process, my first thought would be, all right, now I need an attorney. I need to go hire a divorce attorney. And from that point forward, it seems like the combative nature of this process starts. At what point did you guys decide to come together and join forces and start a business around this idea of collaborative divorce, where people can go through this process in a more amicable way, in a more consultative way? When did that idea come to fruition, and how did you guys link up together in the first place?
All right, John.
I'll start. I'll speak for myself. And interestingly enough, I met Elizabeth initially through the process known as collaborative divorce. And I don't know that we'll dive too far into it. It may be its own episode where we talk more specifically about collaborative divorce. But based on our experience, there were issues with collaborative divorce also. It sounds catchy. Potential people considering divorce can latch on to some of the ideas and some of the catchy words. But when you actually implement it, there's still some shortfalls there within what is known as a collaborative divorce process. So that's initially how I met Elizabeth, and then subsequently Adam. And we noticed that all of us have similar goals, and we've identified similar issues that we see through our own practices. And we also realized that we've got some weird sense of humors. And so maybe through a podcast, we can take the things that we've learned through our practices and also combine that into some of this weird senses of humor. And I'm going to try to control myself today since it's the first episode, but I can promise you going forward, that's not going to work so well. And try to shed light on something that really needs to evolve, i.e. the divorce process. And also make a little bit of light of it. It's not going to suck less. I say a lot that we can't make divorce not suck. It's a sad event, but we could probably make it suck less.
And
Making divorce suck less. Wonderful tagline.
I like that tagline, actually.
It's pretty good. It's pretty good.
It is good. It is good. Yeah, I think that's for Elizabeth and I as mental health professionals. I think part of the reason that we both got into this sort of iteration of our practice is that we had been working with both sides of families for many years, both families who were in the process of probably contemplating and then eventually divorcing, and then what was probably, to use John's words, the sucky aftermath of a really crappy divorce process. And as a mental health professional, kind of being inherently interested in people functioning as their best selves, we really truly believe there's got to be a better process so that families don't have to end up in a sucky place. Even though they're divorced families, it's another type of family, it's another structure of family, but trying to help people transition through that in a way that doesn't create chaos and animosity. And again, like John said, it's gonna suck. We hope it's gonna suck a little less, but we also hope the end process is still a family that is connected and functions in actually a pretty constructive way. And now we know that is possible. We have seen couples and families transition in a way that is different outside of the traditional litigious process of divorce and actually end up in a significantly better place as a result.
Sorry, I just want to say one thing. When I first met Elizabeth, I had absolutely no idea if she was a good therapist or not, marriage and family therapist. I knew nothing about her. But what I did know is she had some really catchy lines that I agree with. And throughout this, we're going to use them all the time. I'm going to suggest that if she didn't make them up, we give credit to whoever did. But they're really catchy and they're really cool. I can tell you just from my own personal experience and family, I come from a family who screws up every single line. So if we try to repeat a line from a movie, we're going to completely butcher it. So I'm not going to do that, but I will ask Elizabeth, one of the things that jumped out at me that I immediately agreed with is, and then she could tell you the actual line, that a divorce is much more than a legal event. So what is the actual line?
I have no idea, but because I don't remember.
Oh my gosh, you just ruined it for me. You have no idea.
But the truth is, one of my lines is that we, as the divorcing adults, define what divorce means to kids. And divorce is actually new. Like until the 70s, you could only get divorced if you could prove that your spouse was injuring you or injuring themselves. And you had to ask for the divorce. And so the divorce process grew from this animus, angry space where you had to prove your spouse was wrong. And it wasn't until no fault divorce in 1981 that you had to prove to the powers that be, the judge, that you deserved to be separated from the person that you had chosen to get married to. So the divorce process grew from that. And so now as we enter about 50 years later, we're learning to be proactive as opposed to reactive. We don't have to show that our spouse is the worst version of themselves. We can just decide that we are our best version of ourselves if we're not together. And so in that kind of evolution, it's important to take personal responsibility and to show up with this person you chose to have a family with and often chose to have children with in a way in which you don't have to tear it all down to rebuild it. You can remodel, so to speak.
We're gonna have to do an episode. I'm making a mental note of this in the future to talk about the astonishingly high divorce rates in our country now. I think what are they, over 50% of marriages end in divorce? Is that an accurate?
Yes, and second marriages are higher than that.
Yeah,
And people are, and we know that 1 out of 2 couples are likely to face this transition. And so therefore, if you're a child of divorce, which Adam and I are, if you're someone who got divorced, which is also me, there's a likelihood that it's going to impact you, either your own life, your own marriage, you're a child of it, or your family. And if the process can help you be better, even though it will suck, there's no de-sucking it, so to speak. The idea is that it doesn't have to be awful. And in the end, the reality is no one really cares. There's a fantasy that somebody cares that you were wronged, that a judge is going to see. Go ahead, John.
No, you can finish your thought.
Oh, I was going to say there's a fantasy that a judge is going to look at you and say, oh, you know what? You are 100% right here. Your spouse is really a jerk. And therefore, everything that you two created together, your children and your financial landscape, it's all yours. Go and be free and live your life. Like that, who doesn't have that fantasy? Because we know that from our perspective. Go ahead.
Yeah. Unless we're talking about hitting a baseball, a 50% rate on pretty much anything is usually, or for most things, is not good. And so since I'm here with 2 therapists, I'm going to say, what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. Right? And so we have all this high marriage rate with all these marriages failing. Right? It's time to ask the question, why? What could be done differently to hopefully decrease the rate of divorces? And then on top of it, you've got so many people who, if they decide to get divorced, it's a miserable experience and it impacts the entire rest of their life. And that's another thing apart about insanity is, why do we keep doing this same process over and over that everybody knows sucks? It's going to cost a lot of money. It's going to take a lot of time. There's all these negative things, right? It's not hard to tell somebody who knows nothing about divorce that it's going to suck. Why are we not thinking about how can we do it differently? And that's part of where I think InDivorce comes in, because it's like we want to change how this is going to happen, how things, if the rate is so high, how can we help people do it differently? Because we already know that if you do a little research, stop rocket science, it sucks. Everything about the normal process sucks. So we had to put our heads together and figure out how could we do it differently. And part of that, to go back to what I tried to remind Elizabeth of what she says, is that a divorce, it's a huge life event, right? Like retirement, like death, right? There's all these things that we're prepared for. Most people are not prepared for marriage and they're not prepared for divorce. But the reality is that it involves things that is so much more than legal, whether it's financial or it's emotional or therapeutical. The legal side of it is such a small part of it, but the legal people have the biggest role currently, but they're not therapists. I went to law school. No one taught me about a lot of financial aspects. No one taught me how to help clients therapeutically. They just taught me how to think like a lawyer and what the lawyer does. Right. And I'm an accountant. And when I did accounting, no one taught me the legal side or the therapeutic side. But the irony of this entire event is that it is so much more than legal. We're talking about 2 people who likely have a trouble communicating, either between themselves or with their children. That's not what lawyers are trained to handle or how to transition. We're talking about how to analyze a financial situation that's in the best interest of the family. Most lawyers are not trained on how to make those decisions or do that analysis, right? And so at the end of the day, this is so much more than just a legal event. And we think that if we can change the shift in how people think about it and allow them and give them the information they need to focus on the things that can make a positive shift in their life, both personally and with their family, then we can change the entire dynamic around divorce. And that's where InDivorce, from my viewpoint, came in.
Absolutely. You nailed it there. I'm still so intrigued by the idea of combining forces, because in the end, all this comes down to communication and work. For me, this has been a big thing in my life, north of 40, really doing a lot of personal work on myself. And some of the things that I've learned is some of the deepest things that trigger me with my own family are things that I'm reflecting about myself. Whereas in the past, I would be triggered by something, I get angry and defensive, and I wouldn't be able to communicate that effectively because I was awash with the negative emotions. And now I'm a lot more present. So when I dig into these thoughts, what I discover now is that, like I said, most of the things are a reflection of things I don't like about myself. And it's like this subconscious trigger trying to avoid me looking at these things that need work, because it requires me to do work on myself. And that's all I have control over. And the more I do that, the more effective the communication comes and the more the relationship thrives. So I think it's wonderful that you guys bring that background of marriage counseling, therapy, communication at the forefront of what you do. I could only imagine that you might have clients that come to you for divorce and end up staying together and speaking with you. I'm sure
you read my mind, Jeremy. So we can't, and we're not allowed to advertise this, right? Like, we're not going to get your marriage back together necessarily, but we have. And I'll tell you why we have. Because oftentimes when a critical event happens in your relationship that overwhelms you, and it could be infidelity, it could be some sort of betrayal on any level, your first reaction usually is to protect yourself. And so then all of your Greek chorus, the people around you who love you, are going to say, you better protect yourself. And the first thing they do is say, go speak to a lawyer. When we are fortunate enough to have people who know about us and they instead come and speak to us, what we do is we're able to hear them. We're not looking for how we're going to prove how broken this is. We're listening to where this is at. And so there have been more than one couple that has come to us who we've been able to slow it down enough, educate them, right? Because sometimes it's fights about money. Even just John creating a way that the family can look at the financial landscape from a neutral lens. We can learn how to talk about the money and how to spend the money and how to save the money. We've been able to meet with people and talk about why they couldn't talk together or why there was space for somebody to enter into the relationship. And because we're not looking at ripping it apart, we're looking at just to find out where they're at. Oftentimes they're able to turn back towards each other. And Adam and I don't act as therapists in that way, but we can refer them to therapists at that point, and they can work on that relationship. And then they leave our process knowing about what their life looks like financially and emotionally. And so it feels, while everybody doesn't need to come to us to consult about their marriage, the reality is no one teaches you how to be married. So
only on the job training with that one.
Yes.
Jeremy, you said that part of what you said is working on your sort of your own awareness of your emotional space, how you come to the decisions that you've made. And in my experience, most humans make, I'm going to say, not such great decisions in highly emotional spaces.
You think?
So when we are triggered with a lot of emotion and powerful emotion, anger, hurt, disappointment, our decision making tends to go south. And unfortunately, as Elizabeth talked about how the process of divorce started, if you take those emotions and you put them in a adversarial process, because that's what the legal system has really turned out to be, it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody that those emotions sometimes actually get amplified as opposed to managed effectively. And fueling the fire tremendously. And so I think part of the reason we sometimes see that outcome where you talked about couples turning back towards each other is that through the process of learning what is this about for me? What are my needs? What are my interests? What is important to me? What is it that I value? Sometimes people then look at their decision making a little differently. And even if they do go forward and transition through the process of divorce, because they are doing it not in such a highly emotionally volatile state, but one in which they understand not only their own interests and values, but also the interests and values of people that they have cared about for at least a period of time, we find that the outcomes are significantly better.
This
Yeah.
is really, I think, about understanding humans, and I don't think it's really rocket science. And I'll give you an example, right? So people go to attorneys because they think they need advocates for themselves individually. And some people do. In divorce or other alternative dispute resolution processes, it's not going to be for everybody. Some people are just, are assholes. I'm sorry. Can I say that? They are, right?
Hey, whatever
Doesn't
you
matter
want,
if you
brother.
show them a different process, they're still going to want War of the Roses. But the reality is, it should be, especially when you have children, it should be about what's in the family's best interest, often more so than one individual's best interest. Because another thing Elizabeth likes to say is that at the conclusion of a divorce, you're usually not done with each other. Right?
Yeah.
In other areas of law, right, if one company is suing another company or there's a tort or something, right, at the conclusion of it, no matter the outcome, they're done with each other. They don't necessarily have to continue. The fight does not go on, right? But in family law, congratulations, right? You technically, your first round of litigation's over. But how you act today will often determine what your future is going to be as well. That's another line that I'm screwing up, but right.
That's okay.
So, right, we should be thinking quite often as a family as a whole, even if there aren't kids, what's in these two people's best interests. And so, when I to go back or circle back to its human nature, right? If I look, and maybe if people aren't watching this and they're listening, they're gonna have no idea what I'm talking about. But if I looked right now and Jeremy's got a tree behind him, and I said, Jeremy, your Christmas tree sucks, man. Like, I'm looking at the ornaments and it's missing. I don't get it. Where are the cool ornaments, right? You're now
How
just
dare you?
naturally going, what?
How dare
Exactly.
you?
Right. And for the record, the ornaments are awesome. But the point I'm trying to make is we've now are going to engage in a dispute. You're naturally going to get defensive, or I'm going to look at the guitar behind you and I'm going to be like, that's a shitty guitar. Or why did you decide to play that instrument? And we're going to now get into this back and forth debate about whether your tree is great or not, or whether the guitar is the best instrument. And all we're doing is wasting time and money arguing over something because I just made you defensive, as opposed to having a discussion about maybe the tree could add a little bit of a different color. One, what is a solution-based result to this? Me coming at you and saying something negative is only going to piss you off, rightfully so, and that's what it would do to me. And that's where litigation goes wrong so often. It's who made who. Anyways, I don't want to go too far down the guitar tree road.
Right.
But the point is, it's all about how we communicate. And if I say something that's going to make you defensive, we're just arguing for the sake of arguing. But we're not actually figuring out what bothers me about the tree of the guitar.
Yeah.
Or why was it so important to you about the trio guitar? And what is a solution that can both make us happy, where we don't feel like we're giving up something important to us that creates resentment to the other person? Like, this is a lot. That's my frustration quite often, is a lot of this isn't, so much of it can be avoided. And even in a collaborative law process, they still do the same nonsense of arguing because they feel like I've got to be the advocate. I got to argue, right? I've got to defend. And so what am I going to do? I'm going to prove my wealth and my value by arguing. And it's no, why don't we focus on the solution?
When you said, no, so much can be avoided. I think what's probably unavoidable when couples get to this place in divorce are those feelings, hurt, anger, disappointment. That's not really avoidable. What we do with it is really what matters, right? And that's why I think the process is so important, that the process is about learning how to take information from those feelings, because those feelings are important, they're valid, they need to be heard, understood, and then hopefully used in a constructive way in terms of moving forward. But we can't avoid those feelings. Go ahead.
Part of the way we came up, and we should do a whole episode on how we came up with our name, by the way, for the podcast, because Jeremy, you have, I can't even tell you what we went through, but so the reality is that when you're hurt,
For the record, I had a really funny name that was vetoed.
yeah.
For the record, actually, there's Elizabeth and two guys. The two dudes agreed on the name. Elizabeth didn't, and guess who won? So,
yes, guess who
anyways,
won?
that is life. Go ahead.
It was slightly aggressive, the other option. I think you nailed it.
I don't recall asking Jeremy his opinion right now.
So anyhow, we will do a whole episode on the names but anyhow, the reality is,
and we're gonna do something on social media where we will announce that name, and we are going to ask people. We're going to take a vote on how awesome the name actually was.
We might end up changing it back after all.
I love that.
Welcome to my world, Jeremy. So the way that this name, and John, I think you thought of this name too, by the way, we have to credit that as well. But the reality is that when you come into that hurt and angry space, we all want to be vindicated, and we all want our advocate to see us as the right one. It's human nature. But the cost of that for your future version of yourself, your future family, that's the piece that we hope to instill for everybody, is that we're not going to make your ex treat you better. We're not going to make your fear of being single easier, but we're going to make it so that the day that those papers are signed, you're not in a space where you can't speak to your ex-spouse, because one thing I do say is that your divorce will be defined by the personality of the professionals that you hire. That's one of my sayings that John likes. Because, and so when you finish that divorce process, all of your professionals go home to their own versions of families, whatever those look, and as screwed up as they are. But you're left with that person that you just divorced, most likely raising your kids. And so it's important.
Yeah, and John mentioned the war. Oh, go ahead, John.
Go ahead.
No,
I want to blow this whole thing up. So if you've got something interesting to say, I'd say it right before I pulled it.
Blow it sky high. I'm happy to.
So we've talked a lot about history. We've talked a lot about our logic and our why on our processes. And that is, I think, something that will resonate with people when they hear it. But I think that we can also normally have some funny conversations and tie it into things and not always be so serious, right? Because we want to make the podcast suck less too. And that's our motto. Right? And so I'm curious to ask Adam and Elizabeth, what is their opinion of Shrinking, this show on Apple TV? Because the reality is so much of our lives, I'll just say this, we all think we're so different and having different experiences, and celebrities, non-celebrities, business owners, non-business, but the reality is all of us are experiencing the same stuff, right? It doesn't matter who I talk to, who I consult with, almost all of our problems are similar, right? And so there's a lot of stuff that we see on television or in music and stuff like that I think we can bring into the podcast in future episodes. But I want to just start really quickly because I know we're probably running out of time. What is your opinion as therapists of the show Shrinking on Apple TV?
Is that the one? That's the show with Harrison Ford?
Yeah.
Yes.
Right, yeah, that was very good.
And Jason Segel. And
very entertaining.
Personally, I like it. Go ahead.
It's a great show and we know we have a hometown star on that because Luke Tenney went to high school at American Heritage with my son, so that's fine. But I think that sometimes who doesn't see yourself? And so there's so many days. A funny story, right? So when I was going through my divorce, I was doing another divorce process. I was doing a collaborative divorce, which we've pivoted away from and iterated away from, with a woman, and they were fighting over minutia. And so I'm going through my divorce. This person's going through her divorce, and she looks at me, and on this, and she said, "Would you be happy with $25,000 a month?" And
Objection, non-responsive. I have absolutely no idea what that has to do with the show shrinking.
I'm going to tell you. I'm going to just wait. I'm going to tell you.
Land the plane.
So,
Land the
Elizabeth.
plane. Land
I'm
it.
landing it. So the point is, right, that I was going through a divorce where that wasn't a fraction of what I was going to be able to even be thinking about for my monthly budget. And you have to sit there with a professional face and say, and so you're going through your hell, they're going through their hell, and everybody's hell is relative.
Mhm.
So that was my connector. Did I get there?
No,
I didn't get it. I don't
I missed
get
it.
And so, Jeremy, just make a note that
So-
we're going to have to circle
Red?
back and have a continuing discussion
My
about the actual show and characters. Go ahead. Adam.
so
We'll get
my
there. We'll get
point,
there.
John, my point,
my-
John, is that you can't have dead wife face when you're working. That's my point.
I didn't
But
quite
technically,
get those
the dead
dots,
white face
but
wasn't the therapist,
wife
but it was very
Yeah.
funny. Go ahead.
yeah, it's funny. What? Go ahead, Jeremy. Go ahead.
No, you go first, and I'll
No, I was going to say, when John talked about the humor, I often tell my clients, just to give them a heads up, that it may sound like English is my first language. I actually see sarcasm as my first language. English is really my second one. And so I still remember my grandmother. One of her lines rings in my head, which is, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything. Because my mouth would sometimes engage a little bit before my brain when I was a kid. So in Shrinking, one of the things I love about that show is that they sometimes say the quiet parts out loud. The therapists do it, the other humans do it. They have an amazing ability to show humanity with just in your face, with all of the emotions, the sadness, the dead white face, dead mother face, the humor, the sensitivity. I feel like my brain and Gabby's brain are a little aligned. The character in the show, she says shit that just, I'm like, yes, that's exactly what I was thinking. And yeah, I really appreciate the ability to show that side of humans, because sometimes we don't talk about that shit. And I think there's value in it.
Absolutely.
Did that answer your question, John?
And I see
It's a
Jimmy in me,
start.
unfortunately. I have a little too much Jimmy in me. That's
Yeah.
And see, that is an opening to something totally inappropriate that we'll save for another time.
Edit. No. So I'm gonna shift for a second because I want to get something in to this episode before we wrap up. I want to speak to the folks out there listening that are in a place where their marriage is troubled and they're considering divorce, and their first thought again is, okay, I need an attorney to protect myself. I want you to go through your process. Like, what can pull the walls down, pull the curtain down? What can someone expect when they reach out to InDivorce? What does that process look like? Do you do a consultation with all three of you? Do you start with one? Walk us through what somebody can expect should they reach out to you for assistance.
So,
All right, John.
I would suggest that anyone considering divorce do reach out to us. There are certain situations where people have already maybe made a decision that they're looking for something other than traditional litigation, and the three of us may have a meeting with them. There are other times where I find that people don't know, they're just exploring their options, right? And sometimes it doesn't even mean that they're ready to pull the trigger, because most people don't just wake up one day and go, I want a divorce. It's probably been something that they've been thinking about over time, and maybe something happened and they're looking into it. I would suggest people reach out. And I'm happy to talk to anyone about what their options are. In order for InDivorce to work, in my opinion, both
spouses have to be on the same page. And I don't mean that they have to agree on the outcome per se, but they both have to be looking at this from a proactive standpoint of what's in their family's best interest. Because if one person's looking at it that way and the other person is not, we're not going to get very far. We wish we could. We want to help everybody, but we've done this long enough to know that there's going to be some people that just need the litigation route. And so I'm happy to talk to anyone and talk about what their options are and explain the differences. How is this like mediation? What is mediation? Do we need to have lawyers? Do we not need to have lawyers? What is collaborative divorce? How is this different than litigation? I can have honest answers or questions, and I can answer honestly after learning about a family what is probably in their best interest. I always say I'm not trying to sell you on our process, because our process, I don't want to waste your time and I don't want you to waste our time. I don't want to try to convince someone that this is the way to go if I can tell from talking to you that this is never going to work, right? Maybe if there's some type of abuse or some type of addiction or something, like we're like, this is, but I'm happy to talk to anybody, and that's my
So,
long-winded answer.
so
All right.
wait,
So the process really starts with a consultation with the three of us. And piggybacking on what John said, the consultation is really for us to learn a little bit about what the couple's interests are and where they're at in their own process, and then to give them information and to educate them not only about what working with us would be like, but what the options are in terms of divorce, because our process may not necessarily. And we want to gather a little information about them, but we also want them to make informed decisions. A part inherent in our process is the fact that we provide a tremendous amount of information and education along the way so that people can make informed decisions about what's in their best interest and the best interest of their families. So that's really how it starts. I think we all believe tremendously in the value of the information and education of the couples we work with.
and so and just to speak a little bit about what somebody can expect, like so we always have a consultation with the three of us if possible, and it's always free, because again, we are doing something different and we are educating the community. And the other thing that I think is really important is that because divorce is a financial, there's massive financial impact no matter what socioeconomic strata you're coming from, what you're going to have half. So that automatically whatever you're used to living on is going to be split. And so all three of us don't want the process of divorce to also blindside you or keep you from making a decision that otherwise you would want to make. So our commitment is to offer a flat fee. So after we have that consultation, you're going to provide us like kind of the skeleton frame of your financial complexities, and then we let you know what it's going to cost to work with us, because it's one way that we can alleviate a very stressful situation. And sometimes we're being silly here, but the reality is all three of us are pretty compassionate people, and we also love helping. And we all have come into this, and they're going to make fun of me and say something, I can see it coming. But the reality is, it's our goal, our fantasy, right, is that people will come and consult with us for other things as well, just to learn how to communicate. So before you get married, like a little preview of we'd love to talk to you before you get married, to teach you how to talk about the finances, to talk about what you're thinking before you have a baby. Whenever you have a life event, a transitional life event, that's going to mean that you are going to be different than how you were before with your partner. And those conversations are scary and intimidating. We'd love to consult with you. We start with divorce because that's something you automatically think of using professionals for. But the real goal is to really help people think about taking personal responsibility for your part in the relationship across the board.
I love the flat fee option, because I've had a lot of experience in my life dealing with attorneys, and there's nothing worse than getting those emails with the invoices. It's 0.3 hours and you see a line item for each time you send an email. could get very costly indeed.
Yeah.
Without your
and
knowledge. Uh-huh.
If you got
So-
through like second grade math and you can do simple multiplication and you go, all right, this is going to take 100 hours and it's $500 an hour. All of a sudden you're like, whoa.
yeah, and that's not what we want the couples and families worried about when they're working with us. They've got a lot of other things on their head. The financial cost of this. I know Elizabeth and I have talked to a lot of couples through the process of divorce where a lot of their worries comes from the financial stress of having, like Elizabeth said, to divide something that they've been surviving in one pot into two. And so we don't want to contribute to that financial stress. So the flat fee was really devised to take that worry off the table, especially going back to the 0.3 hours. I've had clients tell me about how they're sitting with attorneys and they're literally watching their money click by as the minutes go by. And that in of itself is going to get in the way of people being able to take the necessary time to make really good informed decisions. We really work hard to avoid.
Indeed. I want to go around. I'll ask each of you or whoever could chime in. And before we wrap up here, you alluded to it earlier about the idea of education through this platform and getting the message out in the community. So for each of you, let's start with, I'm going to start with you, Elizabeth.
Okay.
What is your motivation and goal with this platform?
You can have an amazing product, and if nobody knows about it, it doesn't matter. And so sometimes our clients have come to us through personal connection, through other therapists that know about us. But in general, I don't think people really understand that there's another way to get divorced, and that it doesn't have to be what you've heard of, and it doesn't have to be the way that other people do it. And so our process here, the whole idea here is, John will say that to make it less sucky, which is definitely true, but also it's to really help people understand that they have ways in which they can leave their marriage and almost be, I know this is going to sound silly, but be better for it. And so my goal here is that you get to know us on the podcast a little bit. And then when you come to the office, you feel connected already. And that if you have friends or family that are thinking about going through a divorce, that you would say, you know what, there might be someone that you guys could call. That's my whole goal.
Very nice.
Okay.
Adam?
Is that the question? What is the goal of the podcast? Or just
the motivation, the goal, what do you hope to achieve through this platform? Like, why are we here?
oh.
So I'll take it in the other direction, like with regards to why I'm doing what we do. One of the things that I think is really important for humans, and this is kind of part of my shtick as a therapist, is increasing our self-awareness so we can take responsibility for the decisions that we make. And I think as humans, it's a really good goal, whether it's in therapy or in life. And so as a part of I think a part of the process of divorce, as you've heard us talk about before, the professionals that are going to help you navigate it aren't necessarily going to be there for the years thereafter. And so the more you take sort of responsibility for the decisions you make, the more aware you are of why you're making those decisions for the years after, well after the professionals are gone. I think you'll be in a much more satisfied place. And my interest is helping to really increase people's both awareness and responsibility for why they do the things they do and how they make that happen. That's
My motivation, without turning this into my own therapy session, my motivation, I would say, starts with my father died when I was 1, so I never really knew my father. But what I learned from that experience is life is really short. You never know, right? When things can change, how things can change, when someone in your life will no longer be there, all those types of things. And I think when you grow up with that and when you think about it, that life is so short, you try not to spend so much time on the negativity, and you try not to spend so much time fighting and maybe dealing with the stuff that ultimately doesn't matter. And so I would say that was my initial motivation, is to try to remind people life is short, right? Like, I know it's stressful. I know things can suck, but don't forget it can change like in an instant. And that was one of my motivations of trying to figure out how to do this differently. And then my second personal one was, I still remember being in college and my mom asking me what I wanted to do for a profession. And I said, I have absolutely no idea. I just want to be a good person. And she looked at me and she was like, you're an idiot. That's not a profession. And so now I find myself here, but you can't really change who you are. And I find that this is an avenue that allows me to try to be a good person, to try to treat others the way I would want to be treated, and to remind other people to treat people in their lives how they want to be treated. And don't be an asshole. That's my motivation.
I love it. I want to actually wrap this up with a little poem that came to me last night that kind of embodies this idea of life being short and what I talked about with my personal growth and development and really working on my communication. And it goes like this. This is a good way to end. As I remove these sticky cobwebs from my mind, I find myself immersed in this place and time, grateful to embody the present. It's a gift sent directly from heaven.
Yep.
It's my poetry.
Elizabeth actually wrote that. No,
I think that's
that was good. Thank you.
To end there.
There
All right,
you go.
guys. That was fun. I'm looking forward to this journey and really digging in deep to some of these topics that you guys help with and really raising awareness to truly try to help those out there that are in troubled relationships that need help. So for anyone out there that's listening, if you like this content, please support us, like, subscribe to the show, drop some comments, let us know what you like, maybe what you didn't. If you have anything that you're personally struggling with that you'd like us to talk about specifically in an episode.
Adam's headphones.
There you go. But no, drop it in the comments. This is all about making this process more seamless, more amicable. And obviously the team at InDivorce bring rather unique perspectives. So if you're struggling, reach out anytime. They are here to help. They are a wealth of knowledge. So I'll leave everyone with that. Have a wonderful holiday season, and we will see you all back after the new year in 2025. Everyone take care. Thanks for joining us, and we will catch you all later. Stay blessed out there. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you, and happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Guys.
Thank you for listening to Opportunity Costs. We hope today's episode provided you with valuable information. You do not have to go through this alone. We're here to provide a little entertainment and some potentially helpful insights. You can find more information on our website, InDivorce.com. Be sure to subscribe, and until next time.